welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be doing a quick one about a story coming from the New York Times, headline reading, New York Times sues Pentagon over First Amendment rights. So yes, there's an article about their own newspaper suing the Pentagon. I wonder if they're biased, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a point. So with that, let's ask our daily debate. Is there room for the Pentagon to claim that they have privileged information that you can only ask from the main correspondent or the main press secretary? Do you think that should be the case? Are they allowed to, as a journalist operating in the Pentagon, should you be allowed to ask sources, get underlying information that you don't necessarily get through the press office? I want to know your opinion. Throw it down there in the comment section. And with that said, let's jump into the story. With this, we're going to pull out one of the first quotes. Quote, in the suit filed in the U.S. District Court in Washington, the Times argued that the Defense Department's new policy violated the First Amendment and seeks to restrict journalists' ability to do what journalists have always done: ask questions of government employees and gather information to report stories that take the public beyond official pronouncements. And then they go on to say, quote, reporting any information not approved by the department officials could lead to punishment, quote, regardless of whether such news regarding gathering occurred on or off Pentagon grounds, and regardless of whether the information at issue is classified or unclassified. And both of those quotes, the beginning reporting to officials and regardless all the way down to unclassified, are quotes from the paperwork, if they wanted to be official Pentagon reporters with press credentials. That's what they would have had to sign. Now, that's all well and good, but where's the meat and bones? Where is the underlying issue? Quote, the suit took issue with multiple provisions of the new policy, including one that empowered the Pentagon to deem a journalist a security or safety risk. Such a determination could hinge on whether the journalist engaged in unauthorized disclosure of classified information or certain unclassified information, among other considerations. The policy's wording on solicitation has been a particular worry of media lawyers. It asserts that the First Amendment does not protect reporters when they solicit government employees to violate the law by providing confidential government information, and could apply to calls for tips that encourage Defense Department employees to share non-public agency information, end quote. So basically what they're saying is journalists aren't allowed to do their job. Journalists are not allowed to ask these people to give up information that is not public, that could be classified. Now, being a facilitator of the leaking of classified information, in theory, can get you in trouble. I believe that's what they are trying to get Julian Assange on with the posting of things from Chelsea Manning, in that he provided a platform in WikiLeaks for the propagation and also the aiding. The main thing there is actually the aiding of getting the information, I believe is what they claim. Now, I haven't read up on the case in a while, so I could be wrong. But in that case, actually aiding somebody get classified information is a crime. Now, asking them a question and them giving you classified information, does that inherently a crime? Is it not on the person to not release that information? Is it on the journalist to not ask the question? I don't know if that's necessarily fair. A journalist, as the New York Times puts it, whether I agree with all of their reporting or not, especially around the Pentagon, regardless of my opinions and what you think of them, if they're not allowed to ask questions of people outside the purview of the press office, if they're not allowed to ask sources, if they're not allowed to gather the story, the details and the edge cases around the actual story they're being told, only the official narrative is allowed, and only at specific times are you allowed to ask questions, and only if they're not deemed as bad ones are you allowed to stay and not be perceived as a safety or the exact wording, a security or safety risk. That seems overly ambitious on the Pentagon's part in order to have that much control over their press room, but also it feels as though they're trying to undermine the core tenet of journalism, which is trust nobody, question everything, report the truth. But maybe I'm wrong. and maybe that's not how journalists see themselves anymore, and that's why some are okay with signing on to this. Maybe that's never what journalists were. But in a highfalutin way, I'm pretty sure the lawyers for the New York Times are going to make that argument, and we'll see how this case pens out. If you want to read today's article, you can find the link in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Podcast, Podvine, as well as Apple Podcast. And if you want to listen to 6 and 6, which is 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less, those international episodes come out on Tuesday and Thursday, and these episodes come out on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Come back here and you'll be able to click on it, listen to it if you're on podcast form, watch it if you're on YouTube form. Though it is just a spinning record, YouTube does indeed have the best access, in my opinion, compared to some of these other platforms. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.